In the forgotten vaults of an ancient Florentine library, hidden beneath layers of dust and centuries of silence, lay a peculiar artifact, a reel of film, bound in crimson velvet and sealed with a wax emblem, Ouroboros biting its own tail, encircling a lion's head. The label, etched in fading gold, read, Ad sapientiam periculum est, to wisdom. There is danger. No one knew who placed it there, not even the librarians, whose family had managed the archives for generations, dared touch it. Rumors whispered that the reel was cursed, that those who watched it never returned the same if at all. But Luca, a young historian with a cynical mind and a growing disillusionment with the world, dismissed such tales. He believed in reason, in the architecture of logic, and in the power of history to explain all mysteries. And more than anything, Luca longed for power, not the loud, theatrical kind wielded by politicians, but the silent, sculpting influence of those who understood the world so deeply they could bend its will with a glance. When he discovered the reel on a rain-drenched afternoon, he felt as though it had been waiting for him. Back in his apartment, surrounded by books on statecraft and revolution, he restored an old projector and threaded the ancient film. As the first flicker of light danced on the wall, the room changed. Shadows deepened. Time seemed to slow. The air grew thick, charged with something that felt both sacred and sinister. A figure emerged, neither fully real nor illusion. It was Niccolo Machiavelli himself, or some haunting semblance of him. He stood before a stone lectern in a room, not unlike Luca's own, lit by candlelight and surrounded by the echo of whispered Latin. "You have chosen," said the figure, "not merely to observe, but to become." The video was not a documentary. It was a dialogue, a transmission. Machiavelli did not speak of history as one might recount a tale. He injected it through language, through glances, through truths so deeply buried they trembled in their unveiling. He spoke of virtue as a tool, not a morality, manipulation not as cruelty, but necessity, of love as the most fragile weapon in the arsenal of rulers, of fear as the more reliable leash. Luca watched, entranced. Each word felt like a chisel. Carving into his previous self, he began to see patterns where before he saw chaos. He understood the alliances hidden behind casual conversations, the betrayals that smiled with friendly faces. He saw the scaffolding behind every institution, the motive behind every public act. By the end of the reel, something fundamental had changed within him. The next day, Luca walked into his university. No longer a passive scholar, but a man who knew the architecture of power. Professors who once dismissed him now leaned in when he spoke. Colleagues hesitated before disagreeing. He began to rise, not through effort alone, but through precision. He played rivalries against each other. He whispered doubts that bloomed into crises. He offered loyalty that came with invisible hooks. Yet, for all his growing success, something gnawed at the edges of his consciousness. The video hadn't ended. As the final frame burned on the screen, Machiavelli had stared at Luca, eyes piercing. "Through the celluloid, when you begin to see," he had said, "you will never again be blind. But beware, intelligence is a blade. Wield it or be cut." Weeks passed and Luca's influence expanded. He published papers that disguised brutal truths in poetic language. He advised deans and politicians, always behind the scenes. He was becoming, in every way, dangerously intelligent, not in IQ or test scores, but in his understanding of the soul of power. But with this intelligence came isolation. His conversations became performances. His friendships became assets. He could no longer look at anyone without seeing their angle, their ambition, their price. And every night, he heard Machiavelli whisper, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in riddles, always in truths. The whispers weren't hallucinations, they were instructions. One evening, he discovered a second reel hidden inside the velvet box thinner, darker, unmarked. The film was fragile, almost translucent, as if it were woven from shadows themselves. Luca hesitated for the first time. To watch was to continue down the path. To stop was to return to blindness. But he had already crossed too far. As the second reel spun, The flickering light now pulsing like a heartbeat, the figure of Machiavelli returned not in a study, but in a throne room, empty but for a mirror. Behind him, you have seen how the world moves, Machiavelli intoned. Now see what moves you. The screen shifted. Luca was no longer watching. He was being watched. The film showed moments of his own life, every manipulation, every betrayal, every cost. Then it turned forward, showing what he might become. A kingmaker, a whisperer of tyrants, or something worse, a man who forgot the warmth of being human in pursuit of perfect control. And then the screen went black. Luca sat in silence. Around him, the world carried on, unaware of the awakening that had occurred. But he knew, and more dangerously, he now knew that he knew. The question remained, what would he do with this knowledge? Was intelligence a gift or a curse? The camera, somewhere unseen, was still rolling. The days after the second reel blurred into a peculiar stillness. Luca no longer walked through the world. He floated above it. Every interaction felt staged, predictable, a scene in a play he now directed. The warmth of ignorance had left him, replaced by a relentless clarity that dissected even the most innocent gestures. At night, he dreamed in symbols, a chessboard with living pieces, a city built upside down where power flowed not from the heights, but the foundations. A lion and a fox locked in embrace, neither predator nor prey, always in the corner of the dreamscape. The flickering shadow of Machiavelli watched, never interfering, never speaking, only observing. As if waiting for something, then came the invitation. It arrived not via email or letter, but as a message. Left inside one of his own books, the Discourses on Livy, which he hadn't opened in weeks. On the inner margin of page 213, a new line had appeared. Written in ink that shimmered like oil, those who see beyond the veil are called to the circle. A time, a location. Nothing more. Luca hesitated for a moment. Was this a prank? An elaborate hallucination? It's something deeper than doubt pulled at him. Compulsion born not from curiosity, but necessity. Like gravity pulling water downhill, he had seen too much to stop. The location was a nondescript building in the historical quarter of Florence. Ancient, crumbling, unremarkable to the casual observer. But the door was unlocked, and as he stepped inside, the air changed. Heavy. Expectant. He descended a spiral staircase, lit by torches that somehow didn't burn. At the bottom was a stone chamber filled with 12 figures seated in a circle, their faces hidden by masks of animals: an owl, a serpent, a spider, a raven, a wolf. Only one seat remained empty. "You have arrived," said the figure in the hat. "Lion mask, we've been watching." Luca sat. "This is the Ordo Umbri," the raven mask continued. "The Order of Shadow. We do not govern nations. We govern the logic by which nations govern themselves." Luca said nothing. He knew better than to speak before understanding the terrain. "For centuries," the wolf mask added, "we have safeguarded the knowledge passed down from minds like yours, those who see not the form, but the function behind the form." The owl mask leaned forward. "You've glimpsed the first levels of the art, but there are others, deeper, older, buried beneath layers of language and myth." Another torch flickered. A gust of cold wind surged through the chamber, despite its being sealed. "Each of us once watched the video you did. But none of us stopped there, and none of us returned to who we were before." Luca stared at the circle, feeling an ancient weight settle on his shoulders. "What do you want from me?" the serpent mask responded, voice like silk. "Only what? You already carry your sight. But to sharpen it further, you must make a sacrifice." From the center of the circle, a pedestal rose. Upon it lay a third reel. This one was obsidian black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. "This," said the spider mask, "is the final transmission. Machiavelli's true work, published unspoken. It is not about the nature of power. It is about its origin, its seed." Luca's mouth went dry. "What's the price?" he asked. Silence then. The lion mask answered. "You must sever your final tether to the world. Love, family, trust, compassion. These are anchors. The third reel does not speak to the heart. It burns it. Luca hesitated for the first time since this began. He thought of his sister, who still called him every Sunday. Of Anna, the only person who ever made him forget to calculate. Own childhood memory, his. Mother's voice reading to him under a blanket during a storm. Was this the price of ultimate understanding? The lion mask stood and extended the reel. Take it, or leave it. The choice is yours. But choose now, for the circle does not wait. His hand trembled as it reached out, and then a voice, not from the room, but from within him, not Machiavelli's, his own. The part he had buried, the part he had outgrown, the part that whispered, "Is this intelligence or obsession? Is this wisdom more the loss of your soul?" But the reel was already in his hand. The circle stood. The torchlight flared. The third transmission was about to begin. The third reel spun silently in Luca's projector. Like the first two, it made no sound, not even the mechanical whisper of the film passing through the machine. It was as if the reel defied the physics of motion, or perhaps had never truly been filmed in the world as he knew it. The images were abstract at first, geometric patterns folding in on themselves, fractals spiraling into infinity, a chessboard that fractured into stars. Then a figure emerged, not Machiavelli, not a man at all, but something ancient and unnameable. Wearing the idea of a human form like a borrowed garment, its voice was not spoken, it was felt. A resonance in Luca's bones, a pulse behind his eyes. "You have come to the source," it said. "Now you must see the wound." And then came the images, surgically precise, unflinchingly honest. Luca saw how power began, not as dominance, but as a wound, a fear of death, a terror of insignificance. "I." The first ruler was not a conqueror, but a frightened man who told a lie. So large it became truth. "Follow me and you will not die." That lie had been repeated across empires and ages, dressed in flags and crowns and sacred texts. Machiavelli, it turned out, was not an originator, but a chronicler of that wound. His brilliance lay in seeing it without flinching, without the veils of morality. But he had not been alone. Others had followed the same path and gone mad. Or vanished. The voice continued, "You believed intelligence was a ladder. It is not. It is a spiral. Ascend, and you risk losing form. Descend, and you repeat the cycle. Few have seen the center." Luca was no longer in his room. Or rather, the room had changed. The walls breathed, the air pulsed. He stood before a mirror that showed not his face, but every version of himself. He had not become the father, the artist, the lover, the man who forgave. All had been traded for the one who now stared at the reel in his hands. "You are dangerously intelligent," the voice said. "But danger does not mean power. It means proximity to annihilation. You are standing on the edge. Step forward, and you will know everything. Step back, and you may yet remember how to be human." Luca turned from the mirror. The reel had stopped spinning. His phone buzzed in the real world. A text from Anna. "Hey, haven't heard from you. Are you okay?" He stared at it for a long time. Then a knock at the door. He opened it. The lion mask stood there without ceremony, without words. "The reel is complete," the lion said. "You've seen what no one else has seen, and returned with your mind intact. Have I?" Luca asked. The lion paused. "You're the first who didn't lose themselves, but the cost is not behind you. It's ahead." Luca followed him into the night. The world looked the same. Cars, people, laughter, echoing from cafes, but he could now see beneath it. Not symbols or magic, simply truth. The invisible architecture of fear and desire that ran through every interaction he now had. The gift hand, the curse of ultimate sight. The Ordo Umbri offered him a seat on the high circle. A life of influence, of shaping events not through law or force, but by seeding ideas at the right time, in the right minds. He would never be seen, but he would shape history. But Luca hesitated, because for all he had seen, all he had learned. Something had changed during the third reel, a question that refused to be answered. Can a man live without love, once he has known it? The circle waited. The world waited. and Luca stood on the threshold, not of knowledge, but of choice. Luca stood at the edge of the circle's temple, high above the sleeping city. The skyline of Florence shimmered under a silver moon, its beauty piercing and irrelevant. All at once, it was the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel awe, and even that sensation was filtered through layers of analysis. He remembered something from the first reel, a whisper Machiavelli had embedded in the static between scenes. The one who sees all shadows must one day confront his own. Turned to the lion-masked figure who stood beside him. "I need time." The lion nodded, the mask catching the moonlight. "Very few ask for it. Fewer still use it," Luca returned. Home, but nothing was the same. He saw strategy in every romantic comedy, detected coercion in every advertisement. He couldn't listen to a child cry without recognizing the primal dance of power and need. He began to write not as a scholar, but as a man clawing through his own evolution. He titled the work, The Ethics of Sight, a manual for the post-Machiavellian. Mind, it was not a treatise. It was a confession, a ledger of what intelligence had gained him and what it had cost. Anna visited, unannounced. She stood at the threshold of his apartment, the door half open, her eyes reflecting a concern untouched by calculation. "I missed you," she said simply. Luca wanted to respond, but his mind scrambled for angles, motives, vulnerabilities. She noticed you're still in there, aren't you? She asked. The you I knew. He didn't answer, because he wasn't sure. She sat across from him in silence, not trying to fix him, not trying to understand what he had become. Just being there, it was unbearable. That night, Luca took the third reel from its box and held it over a candle's flame. It resisted the fire at first. But then the celluloid caught, burning with a strange blue light, releasing no smoke, only silence. The reel disintegrated into nothing. He expected relief. Instead, he felt a void, a silence too loud to bear. The next morning, the circle sent a message, not in words, but in absence. The lion mask was left at his door, a gesture both final and open-ended. He understood they would not pursue him, but he would never truly leave them. The knowledge was a stain now, invisible to others but etched into his mind. Months passed. Luca taught again, but differently. He began each lecture not with questions of power or strategy, but with a story, a parable, a myth, a memory. His students sensed the depth behind his words, but never quite grasped its origin. They only knew they were changed by the encounter. Late at night, he still heard echoes of the reels. But he no longer feared them, because he had learned the final lesson, one Machiavelli never taught, one the circle never spoke aloud. The most dangerous intelligence is not the one that manipulates. It is the one that chooses to feel anyway. Winter came, not in the romantic way of novels with snow-dusting rooftops and lovers warming hands in cafes. In Florence, winter meant damp air and restless minds. The city became a study in chiaroscuro half-light. Half-shadow, and Luca moved through it like a man between worlds. He was no longer of the circle. But he was no longer just a man. His students had begun to change. It's not because he taught them the tools of control, but because he taught them to question why they sought those tools in the first place. He spoke of Machiavelli, yes, but not as a master to be obeyed, rather as a mirror to be deciphered. He asked his class one day, "What is the most terrifying form of intelligence?" They offered the expected answers: manipulation, omniscience, artificial superminds. "No," Luca replied. "It is the intelligence that knows it is capable of reshaping the world, but chooses to do nothing until it understands why." Silence followed, but not the awkward kind, the sacred kind. Then came the letter. It arrived by hand, delivered by a boy who said nothing and vanished down the street. The paper was heavy, almost brittle. The seal was the Ouroboros again, but broken this time, its circular loop cracked. At the head dot inside, only a single line: "One of us has defected." The circle fractures. You must decide what burns and what is saved. Attached was a location: Lisbon. Luca packed nothing but a notebook. He told no one, not even Anna. This was not a return to the circle, nor an escape from it. It was an invitation to witness a system beginning to collapse in Lisbon. He found the defector. She was known only as Corvessa woman, whose mask had once been the Raven. She was older than Luca had imagined. Her eyes held both the exhaustion and fire of someone who had spent a lifetime bending reality. "You saw the third reel," she said as they sat in a forgotten monastery, rain streaking down the broken stained glass. "But you didn't obey it. That makes you dangerous to them." "I thought we were all dangerous," Luca replied. She smiled sadly. "No, most of them are merely obedient." Explained everything. The schism, the newer initiates seeking more than influence, seeking domination, the dream of a silent intelligence controlling nations through ideas implanted decades before their flowering. A plan that would turn the circle from watchers into gods. "I left," she said, "because I saw the face of the future they're building. And it had no eyes, only mirrors." Luca closed his notebook. "Why tell me? Because you've walked the spiral and come back with your soul intact? That means you can do something I never could, which is decide whether the circle ends or evolves." That night, as the wind howled through broken walls and history trembled in its sleep, Luca stared into the fire and made a choice. Not to destroy the circle, not to lead it, but to rewrite it. Not as an order of shadow, but as a school of light for those willing to risk everything for the one question more powerful than power itself. Why? He began writing again, not manifestos, not decrees, but stories, fiction, allegories that carried hidden truths. His words spread quietly, translated into languages he never studied. People read them and felt seen. A quiet revolution began, not of violence or control, but of self-awareness. In the margins of society, former members of the circle read his words. Some resisted, some wept, some returned, and somewhere deep beneath the world's noise, the old reels gathered dust, waiting because truth once shown never disappears. It only changes the hands that hold it. Years passed. Luca became a myth. Not in the way tyrants are remembered or heroes are carved into stone, but in the way rivers shape valleys, silently, persistently. His name was never tied to movements, nor his face to broadcasts. But the minds he awakened became architects of a new thought. Not revolutionaries, but reflective beings. Not rulers, but questioners. He died alone, but not in loneliness. He left behind no wealth, no heirs. Only a final manuscript left unmarked on a bench in a public square, where the wind might have taken it, but didn't. It read, "Power is not the enemy. Blindness is. Fear is not the disease. Begetting is. I have seen the engine beneath the world, and I say this: build nothing that cannot bleed, and trust no intelligence that does not know how to cry." His funeral had no ceremony, but weeks later, his students gathered on the steps of a university and read his words aloud under the open sky. And the circle? It dissolved not in flames, but in reflection. Some vanished. Some became teachers. Others remained anonymous, watching as the world slowly tilted, not toward utopia, but toward a deeper questioning of its own reflection. Machiavelli's ghost, if it ever haunted the reels, was quiet now. Perhaps even he had found peace.